Residents of a First Nation in Northern Ontario are once again evacuating their homes with a state of emergency declared over spring flooding. Every year, residents from the northern community of Kashechewan have to leave temporarily to escape the floodwaters of the Albany River. They weren't meant to leave until next week, but plans have been fast-tracked as last winter's heavy snowfall begins to melt. 2,500 people are being airlifted to cities and towns hundreds of kilometers away. Earlier, CBC News spoke with Chief Leo Friday about that difficult decision.
The reason why we call it today is because the report from MNR said that the breakup will be on April 21st. And seeing that lots of snow is in place and the ice still thick, and if it's truly going to be breakup on April 21st tonight, I think it's going to be some trouble in our community because of the thickness of the ice. It's usually a sign when there's a breakup. It's going to happen in a week time, but according to their technology, I don't want to argue, but just to go ahead and do the right thing for the community. It's really sad and disappointing when you can enjoy the land like your elders and parents used to have in the past and what they taught you. And we wanted to continue our generation teaching our young people, our children and our grandchildren to live harmony with the land. But we can't do that now. It's really difficult to go out and worry about the community.
Key to this story is the First Nation is waiting for Ottawa to fulfill a promise to relocate the community to higher ground. Let's turn to Pam Palmater. She is not only a CBC News Network Tonight contributor, she is the chair in Indigenous Governance at Ryerson University, and Pam joins me once again from Toronto. Pam, this is now an annual event for the community. What's your reaction? What's your take on why people are so upset this year?
Well, imagine if this was any other city in Canada and they had an annual flooding evacuation for all of its residents. I mean, this simply isn't fathomable for any other community but a First Nations community. And I mean, I'm not from Kashechewan, but if I was, I would be more than frustrated that you've had numerous political commitments over the years. I mean, the first one from former Prime Minister Paul Martin to relocate the community and had dedicated funding for it, only to have the Conservative government, cancel that, and then to be waiting year after year after year. And then finally, another written commitment, from the federal and provincial government that there would be a relocation plan, and nothing has happened since that was signed.
Indigenous Minister Seamus O'Regan says, we recognize that the threat of flooding during spring break is an ongoing reality for communities along the James Bay and Hudson Bay coasts, and that they are working on a plan. They have a plan to relocate the community to drier land. Take a listen to what he has to say.
Our commitment to a long-term relocation has not changed. That has not changed. What we're doing right now is we're working with the community on just the technical aspects of the move, land acquisition, these sorts of things, and it does take time. It takes a lot more time than I think we would all like.
Pam, what do you think about what he has to say?
Well, when was the agreement signed? I mean, it was signed years ago. I think it's almost been 3 years now. So how much time does it actually take to identify territory that you can add to a reserve, where you can rebuild houses and actually start the process so that the community sees something in the works? This isn't a new issue for any of the governments, federal or provincial. And this is something that's not just a little bit of an inconvenience. This is an actual trauma that's committed on these communities when you have elders and people with mobility issues, severe health issues, mental health issues being uprooted, not just from their community, but separated into different cities so they don't have the supports of their extended families. And then imagine if you were a single mom with multiple young children being cooped up in a hotel for possibly months at a time, kids not going to school, people not doing their regular customs customs and ceremonies. I mean, this is a major trauma inflicted on a community that has suffered numerous traumas before.
What do you say to people who say, look, you know, there are lots of flood zones in the country, Perth, Andover, and New Brunswick being one, but the government doesn't pick up and move people? Why should the government pick up and move this whole community en masse?
Because the government was the one that actually forcibly relocated them to a floodplain, knowing that it was a floodplain. This isn't a situation where they chose to live here knowing what the risks were. This was forced upon them. This community was built here, and now year after year after year, they have to suffer from damage to their homes, mold contamination. I mean, it was in, I think it was 2005, 800 residents had to be evacuated for E. coli contamination of the water. I mean, it gets worse and worse and worse the more you don't actually deal with the mess that Canada itself created.
Okay, so the Liberal government would say, look, it was canceled by the Conservatives, and we've only had 4 years to deal with it. What do you say to that?
Well, they're not taking it as the national crisis or emergency that it is. If this was another city, another locale, this would be, all resources would be brought to bear. But you have a situation where Kashechewan's leaders have had to advocate and advocate and advocate, and you've had NDP MP Charlie Angus trying to raise the alarm in the House of Commons for literally years. And now it's multiplying. So you've got this crisis of annual flooding, you know, destroyed homes, moldy, contaminated houses and contaminated water. It's no wonder that you have people who are feeling desperate and who are feeling depressed, and higher rates of suicides. I mean, the rash of suicides they had several years ago, one of the children was as young as 9 in terms of a suicide attempt. So this is a crisis, a human crisis on many levels. They can and should be bringing all resources to bear to speed this up.
All right, Pam Palmater, Chair in Indigenous Governance at Ryerson University, joining me in Toronto tonight. Pam, thank you.
Thank you.